Easter. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Sally, and this is the state of the nation. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Again, welcome to the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Sally, and this is the State of the Nation. As you know, our purpose today is to discuss the future we want, the Uganda we want. What does it look like? How do we get to that Uganda? It's something that sounds very small, but something very important. How do we get to that Uganda? How does it look like? Are we ready? Why has it taken us so long to have a discussion of this nature? Why is it important for us to start having this discussion? It's very important to figure out these questions. I know we have been for far too long, we have been trying to react to issues in Uganda. Whatever happens, we discuss it. We come up with what we think are possible solutions, but we really never execute anything. Is it because we don't have a plan? Do we have a plan? I don't know. I'm going to be posing these questions to my panelists today to try and figure out why has Uganda stagnated in what we call a dictatorship, and what do we need to do to create the Uganda we want today, even when we think it's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. What do we need to do today to prepare ourselves in order to get to that Uganda that we think is the ideal Uganda? Is there such a thing as an ideal Uganda? How are we going to build that? And are we ready? Are we ready? That is something that we are going to figure out today and try to see how we can get to that kind of Uganda. Today in studio is soon to be Dr. Charles Katramu. There is Dr. Joel Mirembe, and Dr. Stella was with us earlier. I think she's going to join us shortly. Tuli mu nnaku nkulu, of course, you know exactly what's going on. People are still eating masala.
Smiling.
Hopefully, everyone is going to be able to join us shortly. But for now, I am going to invite my colleagues in the studio. Mr. Charles, introduce yourself. How is your Easter? Pleasure to see you again.
Pleasure to see you again, Henry, and meeting the fellow panelists, Dr. Mirembe and Dr. Sarah. I am doing okay. I hope you are, or you've been. Easter, it's a mystery for now. Anyways, Charles Katlamu, PhD candidate from the University of Michigan. Happy to be here, and we see how the discussion about the Uganda we want, the ideal Uganda, and if in any case that exists or will exist. Those are some of the questions we want to answer. Two questions of the transition that have all along been here, where some people have tried to attempt to answer them and later on failed in their own answers. So those are some of the issues that we want to grapple with today, and hope this could be insights that we causing in media that would later speak to institutions that are aimed to take on the mantle to cause the ideal Uganda we may need or we want for the future.
All right, all right. Thank you so much for that small introduction of yourself and, of course, the topic as well. And some of the questions you're going to be grappling with in the next 90 minutes. Dr. Milembi, are you settled in?
Yeah,
Eastern
Henry.
Gambachi, pleasure to see you back again to the state of the nation. What's going on in Kampala? Yeah, and what are your thoughts about the topic today?
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry, for organizing this show for today, and in particular, the topic, State of the Nation Address. But before I comment on the topic, I want to send my greetings to the people of Buganga, Maokota, where I come from, whoever is on the show watching, and send my greetings to them. Of course, my name as usual is Mirembe Joel Suvuga. I am a medical doctor, and in the Uganda I want, I've chosen to focus on health equity advocacy. I want health equity to be realized, since that is a line where I'm technically trained and surely competent. So I'm glad that we're discussing on such a day. Me, I'm a believer in Christ Jesus. And a day when he was crucified on Friday, as the days have been designated, and today has been designated all over to celebrate his resurrection. May my country, my community, see or realize actually in a practical sense how, like, we are in a state where we are surely partially, if not fully, dead as a community, as a country. So we need to resurrect and get into the Uganda we want, as the topic is for today. So for me, I'm happy for the topic. My apologies for signing in late. It was not intended. It's just a day became a little bit very busy, and the program time
Hectic.
caught me in the road. Yeah, caught me in the road. So actually, I've not yet had my lunch. It is.
What if you haven't had lunch at after 7:20?
What do you want me to say? I've not had it. So you want me to say I'm going to have supper? What?
Yeah, I'm saying.
How did I have breakfast? It has
You
been
had,
very.
hey, you
So I'm
leaders.
happy to meet Katramu Charles from University of Michigan. Hope he connects me also to get some papers from Michigan University. So basically, that is it for the introductions. I am, what else should I say? Yeah, I'm a president for Uganda Medical Association, Central Uganda branch.
Right. Central
Yeah,
Uganda or
and
Uganda? What's the difference between Central Uganda and Uganda?
they are the same, I think, but the nomenclature just varies around that. So
Is Uganda
basically,
in the center of Uganda, though?
we can't tell. We can't tell.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't tell.
Those
I
are
can't
some of the
authoritatively.
questions we shall grapple with along
Yeah,
the
that is,
way.
that is very
And
important for us to establish, and but I'm not yet sure. So basically, that's it. The question of Uganda I want surely has been in my head for long.
right.
Something we had hundreds of meetings over when I was in People Power, NUP. I was on their manifesto team.
Right.
And surely we had a series of conversations on this question. I'm happy that it's coming out in public space to be discussed. Thank you very much, Henry.
You're very welcome. So that's another confession that you have had conversations behind the doors contemplating the Uganda we want. How does it look like? What is an ideal Uganda? What are some of the steps we need to take to achieve that Uganda that we crave for, that we are looking for, not just for ourselves, but for the future generations, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for everyone who thinks about this question very critically and thinks about ways on how to achieve that Uganda. Dr. Joel, you said that this is a question you grappled with during the people power movement. Of course, when we talk about people power, we also talk about NUP because people power later on evolved into NUP. So some people who are in people power stayed in the so-called people power movement, and then there was a creation, the new creation, which is the NUP. Have you realized any of the aspects of that dream? Because I think in understanding or in trying to envision the ideal Uganda, we need to figure out what has been our history. Why are we where we are right now? What has been our history, and what do we need to do to get? What steps do we need to take to get to the ideal Uganda that we are talking about? In your conversations during the NUP policy committee or the People Power Policy Committee, what did you guys discuss? And have you achieved any of the steps you thought that you would take to achieve that ideal Uganda?
Yeah, Henry, you see, the last statement that made, have you achieved any of what we believed, probably what we laid down, what we wanted? You know, it's a dilemma kind of question, because the Uganda we want should involve and engage everyone from an individual level to the basic community level, that's a family, then a village, upwards to the national level as we are. Some people have believed that the Uganda we want should have somewhere the word states, you know, Buganda as a state, maybe, Acholi as a state, maybe Bisoga as a state. A lot, that is now historical. The former 16 states that made up this country and the like. So, have we achieved? You see, you are putting me in a situation where, because we were in people power.
This is in your opinion. In your opinion,
yes.
Like, what are some of the steps we have taken? Yeah.
You see, we crafted most of this as people power, and you've clearly stated that people power evolved, probably was captured and made small by making it the national unity platform. A party I've belonged to personally at the start of the party, but you cannot realize the Uganda we want. One of the ways to realize the Uganda we want, and it will really need a government that is pro-people, that is people-centered. But currently, you cannot realize that. So whatever we dreamed, whatever we put down on paper, I can tell you it is in the store. We have not realized that Uganda, because of very many reasons, Henry. You realize the media space where probably you could engage now the family, individual levels is not also the media, the furthest state we want, because of several reasons. Here you bring up open-minded people to discuss issues, but in the many media spaces, the space is paid for by those ones actually who are anti the Uganda we want. So they feed the individuals, the common people, with the wrong information. The common people are fed on fears, are fed on intimidation, are fed on propagandistic information. That is very important. Information that is meant to benefit the politicians in opposition, the politicians in the ruling party, and all that. So I must say that we have not realized the Uganda we want. Even we have not reached even 1%. The Uganda we want, you see, before we even answer that question, we would have put laid clear what are the aspects that are supposed to make up this kind of Uganda.
Right.
I will tell you that governments have arms here, the judiciary, executive, parliament, blah, blah. But all those are useless if they are not in that state of the Uganda we want. Because I will use just one word to describe the Uganda I want. I want an institutionalized Uganda. And the word institutionalization is a very modern thing, and I want to attach a lot of value and meaning to it. It shouldn't be just having an institution parliament, but this institution with a spirit, driven by a spirit that is pro-people, people-centered, service. You get that kind of attachment to the institution. When institutions are functional, we shall not have corruption to these grave levels where it is. We shall not have mal service delivery to us, the common people, to these grave levels where it is. When we have functional, just not an institution, but functional institutions, the smallest health center, 2 or 3, that runs in village or parish X, should run as an institution, not as an individual something. The executive should run as an institution, but currently the executive is running as an individual, the judiciary is running as an individual, parliament is running at the mercy of an individual still. So with that in place, we shall never have the Uganda we want. We shall just maybe talk about it and probably pass on the ball to our children, our grandchildren, and the rest. But I wouldn't want us to be that kind of a lazy generation that cannot dream and drive a campaign to achieve the dream.
Let me ask Mr. Katuramu, soon to be doctor. What are your thoughts? What is the Uganda that we want? In your opinion, what should that Uganda look like? And what haven't we done right in the past? Because there are so many people, so many different players who have come into this space trying to tell us that I should be your leader, and I think this is the kind of Uganda that we should be pursuing. In your opinion, both as a citizen but also as a scholar, what is the ideal Uganda that we should be pursuing, and what are some of the steps we should be taking to get there? Also, why have we failed to pursue this in the past? Should we take for granted, or should we take it plainly, as Mr. Museveni says, that we have no vision for Uganda?
Thank you, Henry. So in a Uganda you want, you're looking at a state that is for everyone. Once you have a nation where a group of people think they do not belong to it, or they start developing a mindset of thinking that other people are more Ugandan than them, or other people can actually get more national opportunities than the other group, then you're failing to deliver a nation for all people. You're failing to deliver a nation that people would feel like it belongs to all of them.
Yeah.
So in that situation, while Uganda intends to make over 60 years of independence this year, you've actually had a long span of 60 years in a situation where you have such instances happening, you have such thoughts running through people's minds. Okay, so in the over 60 years, we've not come to terms with the Uganda we want. And like you ask in one of the questions that what does history have to do with this? In those 60 years, as a country, as a nation, we have not seen a transition of power that we can speak to and acknowledge that this was a transition that came with the will of the people.
Right.
Okay? So we have had a series of coups. We have had a series of junta leaderships. We have had a dictatorships. And for everyone, or for many people who thought that there was going to be a revolution, which you can actually say it was, or it happened, but a revolution in what sense? A revolution in which consequences at the end of the day? So for many people who believe that that revolution would deliver the Uganda we want, they have actually come to terms to start doubting it. And one of the reasons for this is that the Uganda we want cannot come in a snapshot, cannot come by a regime. It will only be achievable, or it may only be achievable through a process and a series of leadership that builds on the country in different ways. And if we fail to avail those opportunities to the people who have the potential to actually build the country, then we are blockstaring the Uganda we want. So by some leaders coming up and say that a certain generation, a certain regime of people do not have a vision for a country, without sitting with them and listening to them, without allowing you or allowing your vision to be scrutinized and actually accept that in your vision, you also have selfish interest in your vision, you also have barriers to a Uganda we want, then that's wrong. So there is no authority for some leaders to stand and say that a certain generation, if a certain set of leaders do not hold a vision for this country, or for the country Uganda. So when the revolution happened in '86, everyone thought that what partook that revolution to take place was coming to an end. Of course, there was hope. There are people who have been party or were part of that revolution that as well hoped the same. Okay. And there was progress. There were actually tasks delivered. There was positivity within the population, among the leaders, among the key players in the state or in the country, until the question reversed. Until 2005, we retarded. You know, we ambushed the progress that we're achieving as a country. So since we lost, at the time when we started losing the constitutional order in 2005 with the removal of the term limits, okay, that was the start of the worry or the falling of the Uganda we want. It was a retraction in progress, that the little progress we had achieved as a country. At the time, we had people who still had hope that we are seeing leaders coming in. We are seeing a country that was grooming leaders that were going to partake up positions or opportunities and roles that could build a country. And that was the beginning of those failures. That was the beginning of people starting to lose hope. Okay, and that created an unconstitutional disorder in the country.
Right.
And once you have that, once you have a constitutional disorder, then the rest is history. And that's why Joel today tells you, if there is no institutionalism, if the institutionalization of a state fails, then it ceases to be, that state ceases to be a state for the people. It ceases to be a country for the people.
Right.
Because it starts to run on certain individuals. So its future starts to thrive in quotes on these individuals, which is wrong. So the question of transition of power, which we have failed to answer, that we one time attempted to progress towards, and now we have failed to answer as a country, is a big deal in creating that institutionalization of the country, in creating a country that can thrive on all people rather than individuals. And if you asked me one thing today that I would wish for Uganda as a country, it would be the constitutional order. The most recent, very, you would call it ambitious on one side, but also a very dark side in the country's history, when the constitution, when the age limit was turned down, you saw what happened. There were a series of unwanted events that you would never want to be. Okay? And if you think you have a vision for this country, then I do not think that part of those events are actually part of the vision you hold for the country.
Right.
Therefore, if you have a very much will and vigor to cause such dark days, then we should also start doubting your vision. And therefore, that's the moral authority to stand and say a certain generation, a certain group of people, a certain group of leaders, a certain group of the population does not hold the vision for the country ceases to be or ceases to stand. Okay. So
let's step back. Let's go back to 1962.
Right.
Or right before 1962, when these cultural entities come together and discuss about building the project Uganda and agree to some of the things that they agreed upon, of course, with the guidance of the colonialists, whose interests were at the fore in creating Project Uganda. Do we know some of the conversations that happened during these deliberations within these cultural entities that eventually come together to create a Uganda that whose names end up on the legislature house or the parliament of Uganda? And why is it that since the creation of the project, we have failed in implementing institutions, as Dr. Milembe says, that the Uganda we want should have attributes of institutionalization, which in essence also mean transition of power. Why have we failed at this question? Because it seems to me, hearing from your submissions and also extrapolating from some of the thoughts Dr. Milembe presented, what is failing us today? What is failing Uganda today? And this is the political issue. The political question is that we have failed to ensure that there is a proper transition, unlike in the cultural entities that formed Uganda, which had their respective transition processes. Why have we failed to implement the same in the project that we created?
Anyway, I can tell you to start with that if you want to see an implementation of something that has been agreed to, you need consensus from the point of agreement towards that or those deliberations to the point of their implementation. Now, one of the reasons you would hear or you would get it from most of the people that the 1995 Constitution will remain, I think, one of the best, will remain the best Ugandan Constitution until today that we've ever had. Okay? It was because there was consensus to the minds that came together and supported that both the legislative minds and the political will of that document. And even towards its implementation. Now, where we lost it, and that's why I say that we retracted in our progress. We had a division because one group derailed the consensus. Now, getting back to the question of the 1962 that you're asking is, I can tell you that in my assessment, I can say there was no consensus. In other words, there was unreadiness among the key players at the time from what was thought to be the political arm or the political wing to the cultural institutions. Now, we got the country unreadily, and if there was some signs of readiness, those were pseudo lies. There was dishonesty among the key players,
right?
And that's why you saw that doom befell us a few years just after independence.
Yeah,
because of that dishonesty among players that thought that what had been deliberated on, what had been agreed on among institutions was useless, and therefore they decided to go behind the backs of the other players, and that was wrong, and it was the start of the turmoil that we see until today. Now, that consensus was key, that if they would have respected those constellations that happened at the time, and of course, like you said, with the power, with the help or with the support of the colonial government at the time, they couldn't stay longer. They couldn't afford to stay to oversee, that we deliver or the deliberations we had reached upon as a country. Okay, and they had to give us the chance, but the unreadiness caused the disarray we saw at the time, and then we went into a series of vicious circles. Okay, and until 95, when we had that strong document with the nationalistic consensus across borders. Okay, even though they were partly said there are partial aspects that were not articulated or that had been kept silent. For example, the issue of having cultural institutions at the center. Okay,
right.
The document was strong enough in itself to see how we can cause that conversation in the future. It was
right.
So apparently, probably today we would be having a different conversation. We would be having a conversation on how these institutions, these cultural institutions, can be key players today in our governance. But instead, what we're having today are conversations that were had before the 1995 Constitution.
Right.
So what we're turning to, or what we want to cause, is a consensus stage, which is not easy to come to, because unless we have that, then we cannot have the order we want to create. You're going to keep divided as a nation. So there are things that we may disagree on as people, as players in the country, but there are things where we have to come as a one.
Right. And in order to have some sort of consensus, we must also be courageous enough to speak to each other without
exactly. And that's why I'm saying that there are things that we need to pay attention to as a one.
Right.
Once we think that for all things we need to be in opposition with each other, we need to pull each other's strings, then that's wrong. We're not going to get to where we want to be.
Do you think there is room right now for conversation? Because when you look at the politics of Uganda right now, and I'm very hesitant into jumping, I'm very hesitant about jumping into the economic and social-cultural aspects of this conversation right now, because it seems the political question is
very strong.
It is the strong one. So it's the
if
key.
You don't have it, the rest is going to be history. Whatever you're going to try elsewhere is going to fail.
Right, because there's some people who are saying that, I'm not going to get into the political question. I'm not going to get involved into the politics of Uganda. I'm just going to go and start a business in school, start a business elsewhere, and just forget about the politics. But can we have stability, economic stability, without having
those excuses are okay and right until that business fails in 90 days, when all the profits cannot sustain its expenses or the expenses because of the policies that run the economy in the country.
Right.
Okay. Because your competitor is actually waived of all the taxes they're supposed to pay, and you're competing with such a person. So for you who does not want to talk or to have a conversation around the state that would be favorable for a business you think is even favorable in the current economic situation, you're competing with someone who is levied, who has all those opportunities, and you think you're going to stay in business. That's wrong. Okay. So even when we sit down and have very derivative conversations about the economic policies we wish to have in the country, the social cultural nature or policy that we want for this country, without getting into conversation of answering or getting a solution to the political question we have, then all those will be history, because those will not be implemented. They are going to be gotten against, and we have seen it happen. Okay, we have seen it happen. Every time you're going to see one of the sentiments they will throw to you is that Uganda has some of the best policies when it comes to implementation of different ideas, right? When you go to these different ministries and MDS, government agencies, you find they are very good paperwork, but it is failing. Not because they are not able to implement it, but what is the political will? Okay, you see, I can leave you. You see, this person has come to a point of leaving you. Do these fruitful conversations for your country. But at the end of the day, who is in charge to give you a leeway? Who is in charge to flag you off?
Right.
So once you're ready to have this marathon go on, but the person who's supposed to flag it off doesn't appear, then it will be history. It will be done. It will be doomed. And that's where we are as a country.
Yeah, so what do we do? Because this conversation also is, the political question has been dismissed by the people on the grassroots, the people on the ground, the people who are in the trenches doing business, the people who are in the trenches trying to have social cultural engagements with each other, right? Genda kwanjula, kuwasa, vichi. Those are all social cultural engagements, right? And these people are saying that, you know what, politics start to kwatako. It's none of our business. Which has also translated into the political class, because now the political class is saying, I'm not going to talk to Charles because Charles is NUP and I am NRM. NRM is not going Dr. Mirembo is FDC, does not want to speak to
EPC, for example,
to Jema or whatever. Are we going to be able to answer the political question, specifically the transition question? Because if the political question is failing because of the transition, what must we do as elites, as the political class, to have constructive conversations to ensure that we create a consensus, that will be productive for the political conversations that must happen in Uganda in order for it to be functional, in order for it to become institutionalized. And I'm asking these questions deliberately because the West, where we copy this idea of democracy, for example, France has 2 tiers of elections. Often they vote the first round, and I think the first 3 or the first 4 candidates have to go into a second tier of elections for the people. That's all consensus. They are all creating consensus. The first election is people who are the leaders that should lead us in the next 10 or 20 years. They vote out of and they see who has the biggest percentage. And of those who have the biggest percentages, they have to go toe to toe in the second round for the people to create a bigger consensus. This never happens in Uganda. Even the elections that we have are often sham elections. So how do we engage in a constructive conversations that are going to help us answer the transition question?
Yeah, there is supposed to be a will from the key players, and and if there is no will, the population is supposed to push for that will. Okay, so if that doesn't happen, if we do not speak to each other, if we do not create that consensus, if we do not create that ground to listen to each other, we are not going to see any transition happening. And in that case, I say it because even the next transition that will happen or may happen will be a continuation of the same institution or the same kind of like, say,
oppressive policies.
Yeah, or mentality that you're trying to fight. Okay,
Right.
so we've tested the waters. We've tested the waters in the past because you would think, okay, if one of the current key players is not ready for such a conversation, then let's make sure that we push them out and make them lose the ground into this conversation, and then we see how we deliberate on the issues of the country. But if you failed to make that happen, okay, and which has happened because for over 20 years, that has failed, okay, to happen.
Yeah.
The next step you would have is to compromise, even when you didn't want, because that's why I said that not on every issue we are going to pull strings with each other.
Right.
Yeah, there are issues of this country that deserve a better hear from each of us, and once we offer it, we shall have better output. Okay, so we need to have that ground, and as I say that there should be will, but if you can assess today that will is not there, people are not seeing that need. Okay,
Dr. Milembe, I'm gonna pull you back into this conversation. Why have we failed to create this consensus? Why, for example, why does it become very contentious when people see Honorable Zake with Honorable Anita Mong? Why is that contentious? Why can't those two have a conversation when they're both legislators, but they cannot afford to be seen together, because being seen together means there's something fishy that is happening, and it leads that meeting leads to some sort of distrust in one person or the other. How are we going to resolve that mentality?
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry, and the comrade Katram for the conversation. I've been focused on listening, though I've also been having my lunch in the courts. So now I want to first actually go back to the point when you were introducing the second address by Comrade Katram. You were asking, people are saying, we are going in Chikubo about their businesses and seeing how they prosper as individuals. You see, Henry, for me who is here in Uganda, and my small time of participation in direct politics since 2019, the people actually making such statements, they don't make them out of will. They make them because status quo, for them to thrive, to have some mental sanity, they can only accept fate. Henry, people are frustrated. I can tell you, the frustration is all over. I will publicly state that I joined this activism in 2019 out of frustration by the system. You get? So I have, and I had then still, this vigor, love for this country and of a service. I was a fresh graduate from medical school. I really wanted to serve my people and give them all these skills that I've attained over time. It was a struggle to attain the skills anyway, because I realized that the likes of Mr. Museveni and their age mates started on state money, and they were fully facilitated. But for us, you realize for them, it was not just merit. They could just study. It was, But now, after getting a merit scholarship, the state takes away everything to facilitate you to actually study. They only put for tuition. So you struggle to get the rest. And you are struggling in a community whereby the state has made education so inaccessible that the people you are with at university in a course like medicine and surgery, they are people from rich families alone. So they have a life. You get isolated into some form of living that is hard to describe. So now, I was from a village. Surely I am from a villager. And because part of my motivation to do this course was to provide healthcare to my people. Currently, the constituents I come from, the parish I come from, both of them don't have any health center. Like, for example, a constituency, according to the National Development Plan, is supposed to have a health center for starters. Health center for means that health facility where we have a theater, where there are doctors. That's the level where doctors operate from, for starters. Now, an entire constituency which has over 130,000 people doesn't have a government doctor deployed to serve it. I one time wanted to, be giving some voluntary work, but where am I going to give the voluntary services from when even government has not provided a health center for? At least if there are no staff, some people have taught us, so we would probably offer some service, but we don't have that space. So now, the frustration I was talking about, people are frustrated with the opposition, they are frustrated with the current government. So Wagama, now you want us to do what? Remember that policeman during those bomb blasts? Now you want me to do what? If the police officer was able to ask such a question, now you want me to do what? People are also asking, now you want them to do what? When the political class is only available to exploit their emotions, to exploit their being unsuspicious, to exploit their being ignorant of certain processes of how things are supposed to run. We have a very uninformed society, a society that has not been motivated to know or to take it serious, that to have information you must seek for it. And information is written down. Information is in documentaries. It is not just in space. The kind of population we have, people on Ludo be discussing how kukwana bawala, they be discussing alcohol, they be discussing funny things. You see now, currently there is a discussion about the birthday of certain puppy. Now, and you realize the people in that discussion, people were supposed to be following, and Attorney General is supposed to be following. Attorney General has a duty, is duty bound to protect the country. Is organizing a birthday party. So there is lots of trust. Now, after that, I think I can go to the question you're raising. You could remind me, actually, I didn't write it down.
How do we, as elites, as political participants in the country, how do we create spaces for enhancing consensus when we do not talk to each other? Why is it that it is very toxic for someone from NUP, for Joel Senyonyi to speak to Tayewa? Why does it become that toxic? Why is it toxic? Why does it create distrust? And how do we expect to achieve some sort of consensus in how we should effect transition when we don't talk to each other?
You see, Henry, that is a very important question that you pose, that needs to be propagated, that the last man standing in this country is able to ask such a question. When they go to their Marwa sittings and meetings, they should be able to ask such a question. When we get to that level, everything probably will become automatic. You get, like you open your computer, you go to Word, when you press certain buttons, they expect certain things to happen. So that will become automatic. But currently, the political class, I will speak especially on the side of opposition, because I've worked with many of them, these leading figures in this country, closely, having meetings, discussing things, providing to them alternative policies, and I've seen their weak responses to actually things which matter most. Where the response is where they are able to get a PR capital. You get? So now, the conversation, when people see the Honorable Zake, the Honorable Senyon, and the rest, and you see that uproar on the social media of how it is dangerous, it's not acceptable, it is what, I have a different perspective. But I want to tell you that this is not automatic. It is fueled by other same, like for example, that I can authoritatively state that the biggest actor in the party where those two comes from fuels that. You get? So it's one thing. Do we have leaders? If we have them, do they know what we want or they know what they want? I want to repeat this. If we have leaders, do they know what we want or they know what they want? I want to end to say that they know what they want. They don't know what we want. And when I say what we want, I'm talking about the common person. I'm talking about the poor woman in village X. I will not use X. I will use Bukunge village. It's my village, so no one can say anything. So in my village, we still have people who sleep in the same house with their chicken, goats. When the pigs give birth, the piglets stay in the same house with the people. People are sleeping on funny, on grass, and some are still sleeping in grass thatched houses. People are not able to educate their children above primary 7 because sometimes most of the time no money, but sometimes even those ones who don't have money don't know the value of education. So now, that category of people I'm trying to describe using that wants a people-centered government. Now, our politicians want positions. Okay? They want positions so that they can grow stronger financially, have better networks in Uganda and outside Uganda, because that's what works for them. Now, what they are doing to pitch that envy, hate against Senyonya and Zake interacting with the other side publicly generates for them capital in that direction. Now, these people talk, including those ones fueling this hate. They talk under closed doors. They talk. Let me give you the recent example. The Honorable Chagulanyi Sentam Robert, the president of the National Unity Platform, when he wanted to meet the father of the late right speaker, Jacob Olanya, used an NRM RDC. How did he talk to him? How did he get that RDC? That is a question I want to ask this panel and the country, those watching. How did he get in touch with the RDC? Is the RDC his family member? Is he his personal friend? So if the Honorable Chagulanyi wants to reach out to the NRM circles, talks to the RDC, but then doesn't want people who are in parliament. And anyway, this is so-called speaker of parliament. You allow people to go to parliament and you don't want them to have an interaction with colleague members in parliament. That is intolerance. If we cannot open doors for a conversation of a united leadership that is going to help the common person that I was describing in my village of Bukunge, we are useless leaders.
I'm going to ask the same question. I'm going to ask Katuramu the same question.
So the issue is, why are people suspicious? Those ones who are genuinely, or those ones who are not sponsored to spread that hate. There are people, those questions, and I respect them. One, trust levels have gone down in this country. Leaders are no longer trusted. The NRM has made it a point that actually people lose trust in leaders. So whenever someone sees you hobnobbing with anyone, NRM, if that person doesn't support NRM, they will see you have betrayed them. And I respect their concerns. They need to be addressed openly. Leaders in the party that I belong to, NUP, leaders in FDC, leaders in JEMA, leaders in UPC should open up a public discussion. I use Uganda. You know, I understand Uganda most. I was born in Uganda. I'm grown up in Uganda. Tukoye tetwagala bintu bya kweka. Bwaba boogera na NRM baveeyo boogere nayo mu lujjudde kubanga tukimanyi boogera nayo. We have evidence to that. Julia. Naye ne byokugamba Ssenyonyi yayogedde n'owa NRM tayogera naye mu office nga bakola emirimu gya parliament. Ssenyonyi reports zawa ku floor ya parliament azikola n'aba opposition oba azikola n'aba state employees, most of whom have been vulgarized into the NRM. So if we accept to be in parliament, which is a state arm, we should then open up a conversation, pull these NRM, drag them, because some of the people in NRM surely have their they stopped. They are too incompetent to even have conversation with some of them. So we need to have a forum where the junta agents have an open dialogue with the people. You see, I want to benchmark from the junta himself.
Yeah,
the
so
junta.
Dr. Birebe, let me ask Mr. Katram to
No,
also
let me finish this. I want to benchmark from the junta himself. The junta during that NRA war could have dialogue in Nairobi or Dar es Salaam while the junta was fighting this side. You get that example itself shows you it can be interpreted in two ways. Either the hypocrisy of the junta that he has displayed is very competent about hypocrisy, which our opposition men are also really coming up to display that many of them are none other than hypocrites, or it was tactical ways. Because you see, strategy without tactics is planning to fail. You are planning to fail the moment you must raise strategies, lay tactics to implement the strategies, which our opposition people are not up to speed. You get? So we need to accept the reality we are in, that we are led by a junta government, which we need as early as possible to put it down. But in putting it down, sometimes you need to try to engage them as you cut them down. As you cut them down, there is no way for you to use another DC to access a space of NRM, and then you are the same person who come out to publicly criticize an elected member of parliament interacting with a colleague elected member of parliament. Thank you.
Mr. Katram, what are your thoughts on that issue? And if we are really thinking about the ideal Uganda, does the ideal Uganda involve not talking to each other because we have different ideological backgrounds?
Of course, no. And the issue is that there is no agenda set towards that. The agendas set are different. Okay, they're in contradiction with that. The agenda set by the National Unity Platform or the People Power is in contradiction with some of such principles. Okay, so you do not expect those who follow or who support the National Unity Platform or the People Power or the FDC to kind of like come to consensus, to have a less emotional mind when they see such happening. Okay, so the thing is simple. These conversations happen, or even mere personal conversations may happen among these people on the opposite sides. Why is it that if a picture came out and maybe Mr. Zake is with Mrs. Among, it would cause escalations? The thing is simple. you have set yourselves as people who cannot have discussions or consensus or talks with these folks or with the other side. Okay? So once a picture comes out with such, one, from the people who believe in you or follow with you or who support you, they would think you're going against the agenda. Then for the people who do not follow you but follow the other side, they are going to make noise because they are saying, oh, you said A, okay, but why are you doing B?
Right.
Okay, so because the NRM would say, okay, the opposition is, you're saying removing a dictator, then why are you speaking? Okay, why are you, because the picture you're painting is the situation cannot allow us to talk. So when they see you talk, you're creating emotions, and emotions that are against you. Okay, and even though you think that these are people who may know what they want, they actually do not, which I would disagree with you. Like, they do not know. They may not know what the country wants or the population wants, but they also don't know what they want. You still have people who are driven by their populations, the noise by their populations. Why is it that the people in Kibera strike against the government, and the next day Raila is in talks with Uhuru, and they are calm, and Raila gets into the government, and they are not doing anything because he has refused to be controlled by the noise of the population. Okay, that's someone who knows what they want and may know what the country wants, because that noise is not going to change those schools. That noise is not going to change those hospitals. That noise is not going to change the job situations you're in, the economy you're failing in.
Right.
The problem is, if you're talking to a Hmong, if you're talking to Richard Todong, the SG of NRM, okay? If you're talking to Chigongo, the chair of NRM, what are you talking about? And where are these talks ending? You should have that consistency, and you should have an objective. You should have an agenda of these talks. The problem is you talking to a Hmong, and whatever you're seeking are your personal interests. Therefore, these people have the right to go against you.
Right.
Because you are going against their agenda. However, if there is an agenda that is set alongside maybe the party agenda, okay, you always have a plan A. There is always a plan B. Okay, it is stupid if, as an institution, as a person, even in family management, if you have no plan B.
Right.
Okay. So if there is an agenda, yes, of the party, fine, and there is another agenda to engage in consistent consultations to make sure that there are some wins for the population and for the leaders themselves, then that would be better. But if those are personal talks and everything, if I'm talking to Chigongo or to Todong for my own benefit, for funding for my next campaigns in 2021, then the population it's okay for the population to have emotions against me. And that's what you see. Because this population is in the dark of if there is an agenda of these consultations. So once you have an agenda that for you think that's the only agenda and you're going to stick to that, then the population will be ready to attack you anytime that you want to go against that agenda. So I picked up a very good example of Kenya. Raila is not stupid to talk to who was in government. Now you see what is there today. And I can predict that Raila is going to win that election. Okay. Right. Now, the people of Kibera who have always actually died, some of them have always died in strikes. They have been shot dead, okay, that have always striked or have gone on the roads, on the streets when Raila is rigged. Right. And now going to hopefully gain from the mantle that they have been pushing for the last 15 years, say. You see that? Therefore, where are these talks taking us is a big question. If people are not seeing that objective, if there is no pathline towards that, then they are going to lose sense and they are going to lose direction. Right. So if there are any talks, they should be consistent, because that's when people will know you are not for yourself.
Right. You brought a very exciting example, the Kenyan example. We are just neighbors. And over the last 15 years, Raila has been going head to head with the Kenyatta faction or the KANU faction.
Exactly.
How did they get to the round table? And can we borrow some of those tactics or strategies they use to get on the round table to see that at this moment, Mr. Kenyatta is in support of Raila Odinga, who has been his fierce opponent? And why did Dr. Besigye fail in that pursuit? Because you would say that Dr. Besigye has been very, very, very consistent.
I think he's one person who pushed this government to a point where they were ready to talk.
Exactly. So how did he fail, and how do we get back to that point where we can probably push it so hard that they will want to come to the round table? Because it seems right now, with the lack of professionalized, with the lack of, and I'm saying this consciously because I don't know if the army is unprofessionalized, but I think it's more personalized than it is professionalized. How do we get back to the table where the army is not going to be pushing for one candidate over the other, and we are going to have genuine conversations that will lead to a genuine transition that perhaps can lead us to the way on the road to creating a more sustainable Uganda as a country?
You see, when some of the things we need to worry less about are things like the army. Now, if you, especially if we are now talking about the direction we are talking about, because actually, if it is more personalized, it is actually better. Then you have fewer people to talk to. Because the army we have today is not far from professionalization. They are just attributes that today we are under the orders. We've decisively, or even not willingly, working towards this one person under his orders. Okay, and tomorrow, when we change course as a country, we are not going to get rid of all those people in that institution. It's a matter of putting back the pipe where it was supposed to be. Okay. Now, what I'm saying so is that you have easy ways of bringing these people to the best conversation. You have easy ways of bringing the army to easy conversation because you're talking to a person who is actually misdirecting them or misleading them. Now, if you manage to cause an honest conversation with this person and manage to sell to them your exchange, and they also offer you their exchange that you may agree to, then it will be easy for this person to sell that consensus to this institution, to these people. Okay? On the other hand, per se the army. You get the idea. It is not a series of like, okay, do we have the army represented? Then do we have the political wing represented? Now, the big question you asked, which is actually happened in Kenya, or which is happening in Kenya today, and how Dr. Besigye, I would say missed. Because why I would say missed is that if you fail to, if that opportunity was there, and if he met Mbabazi and they had talks, what about this other person who he has been tussling out with for several years? You know what I mean?
Right.
So he has never met him to have these conversations. However, they missed out on this opportunity. I think the one that the Andrew Mwendas were in the middle. We're in the middle for. They were bargaining for between the two players. Okay.
Right.
And now, of course, partly the issue is that background noise that I told you about, the population noise. Because to assure you, there are people both in government and in opposition that enjoy when there are not these talks, when these conversations are absent in the country.
Right.
Because there are people who enjoy on the part of an economy that is passed to control the other side. Okay, from both wings, from both sides. Okay, now those ones are doing their job well. They're making sure that these conversations are not happening.
Right.
The same way, the reason why Besigye pulled out of the final talks with Amama Mbabazi, and why he did not block Saim, he did not go behind his back in the 2016, was because he was pulled out of those conversations. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he would have gone ahead to back him up, no, but I'm saying the conversations did not go to the finals where they expected them to go, with him in presence. So there are people as well who have a share of control over him. Okay. that did not want him to complete those conversations with Babazi, and those people should have a question to answer when it comes to the talks that were supposed to be between him and Museveni at that time. You get the point. So I'm giving a live example, a fact, that if it happened with Amama Baba's talks and it did not conclude them, then they should be the same people who buried the talks between him and Museveni, that the Mwenders were kind of like middle league or aiming for.
Yeah.
Now, again, that shows you that why are these talks, why are these issues, why a series of these issues are absent today in the politics we have today. And it shows you that we need a platform, but a platform is not going to happen naturally. Okay? We need a platform, and a platform that is there for a win-win situation.
Right.
Okay? It may not be the most honest platform, but it should be in existence, because there is a brick that we are supposed to put for the other bricks to be laid. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it shows you that if Besigye today can come out and tell you that I did not talk to him, however, we were going to talk because the Mwenders had started that platform. Now we need people in this country who can be able to cause that platform, because what Joe, for example, was saying, that these people we call leaders may not know what the population wants, and maybe they know what they want. We still need people. Today, Biden as the president has mentors.
Yes.
At over 80 years, he has mentors.
Yeah.
So what about a Chagulanyi 40?
Yeah.
What about
and Mr. Biden has been in government for over 40 years.
Exactly, but he has mentors. What about a message of, I think, 60 or so? Okay.
Yeah.
So we need people who can cause that bridge, okay, and show this one side that, okay, if we are going into this, this is the agenda. What do you have to put in it? If we are going into this, the other side, this is the agenda. What do you have to put in it? Okay. Then this.
But how do we ensure that when these conversations happen, they do not end up being betrayed? The same way Mr. Museveni talks to the Kabaka, he talked to the key players.
But you see, yes, he talked to the Kabaka. The Kabaka, their talks with the Uganda institution, even though they have not gone to produce 100% of the results, there is progress, and it's recognizable progress. Now, you may not, you see, we may say yes, we may know him as a betrayer, as someone who may not mean what he says. However, when these conversations happen, there is a track record. You remain on record that you had these conversations as a country. Okay, you put up a platform, and there were results. There were results. You see, the talks that Joy referred to that happened in Nairobi, okay, that happened, even the talks that happened in Libya, between Museveni and Moses Ali. May not have been consistent through the process, but it's on record. They talked, they agreed on certain things. One side could have made the point to make sure that what they agreed on is done, and maybe the other side violated the goals they reached at. But that's another story. Can we have the conversation, and then the population gets to know what has been deliberated on, such that we can at least get to understand? Because you see, the other most important thing is that you reform your politics. There is always, you've set a precedence.
Right.
Tomorrow, if you see Chagulanyi today may not be able to talk with the government, because what does this story say? Besigye has been here for 20 years in opposition, and he has not talked to them. Who am I to talk to them? You see, that may not look as a factor, but it is.
But it's a precedent. Yeah,
yes,
it is a precedent.
It is a precedent. So if even though this, because you see, Museveni may betray you today, but you are 100% sure that in 2021 you're not going to take the mantle. You're still going to lose to Museveni or his person, right? Yeah. Therefore, if there is a talk today or a conversation today, and even if he betrays you today, his successor is not going to betray you tomorrow, or may not betray you tomorrow. There is a precedent set, and you've changed the course,
the narrative
of the country, and not for bad. It is for the good. Okay, so the likes of Raila in Kenya, even when they fight, remember what we say, that even though we do not agree, there are issues that we need to come as a one. Now, the likes of the Railas and the Kenyattas in Kenya, Even when they disagree and Raila calls people on streets and everything, and they redo an election which he does not go to, and then Kenyatta wins, there are people behind Raila who know that the best approach is not for Raila to go and sit in his home and wait for the next election. The best approach is to engage this person who has the power. You need to accept where the power is, okay? And you need to accept that the unison, those unilateral agendas you draw on as a single party or as an opposition, but I'm not going to push you anywhere, because they are not going to push this person to withstand with you. Suppress the opposition in Uganda, whether you agree to it or not. So you know where the power is. So in Kenya, the people behind Raila think good, not just for Raila as a candidate or their candidate, but they have an agenda
for the country.
For the country, and they have an agenda for the country that they need to deliver. So as well as the people on Uhuru's side can be recipient of the other group, because they know at the end of the day, they need it as well. They need the other group as well to deliver the country to where it's supposed to be. The dynamics and the individual attributes of these people and what they agreed on may be discussed, okay? May not be something we all like, of how they agreed and everything. However, for us, what we want to borrow from them is, one, how do they build that foundation? How do they bridge that gap and have these talks that actually result into some things that they respect and actually push the country forward? That's
Something
what we want
tangible,
from them. We do not.
Yeah, but I think one of the reasons that we are not paying attention to right now in regards to Kenya is that they have respected their constitution, and their constitution has stood the test of time.
But you see, that's where we want to push. That's what we want now. That's what we want to push for. Because now, our constitution has been violated. There is a disorder. There's a constitutional disorder. Fine. Are we going to keep crying on that? Till when? We need to get into strategies of reinstating that constitutional order that we wish for the country. And we are not going to reinstate it unless you're in power, okay? And you've tried to get into power and you have failed, totally failed, okay? Now, what are you going to do? Sit home? You see,
No.
Some of the strategies I disagree with. For example, like even with one that is set for with Dr. Besigye, the red card.
Yeah.
It does nothing. It does nothing. And it's not going to take him anywhere. So, and people like Dr. Besigye are at the age, human age, the age, in terms of like years, that can actually cause the things. They have the experience. They have lived here. They know the things. Okay? They know they can predict consequences. So we need these mature people, the Kazindas, this guy, the Ruzindanas. Yes, these guys are supposed to come on board. The Karuhangas, and you see, for example, Karuhanga is on this side, the yellow side, okay? Yeah. The Ruzindanas on the other side. And today Karuhanga and the Ruzindana can even go out for a wine. So why don't we have these people? Because you see, that's how you achieve it. You need a person who can talk to this side and the other side. Now, if you have an Eric Karuhanga who speaks well and openly to Ruzindana, who is on the other side, the Mbabas is talk with the Ruzindanas. You've seen them on parties and their children's marriages and everything, the Tumukundes and all that. Okay, so why are we? So these are the people we can rely on. These are the resources we have as a country to rely on. Yes, the consequences may be different, but have you set a precedent? You get, because even if we force the other person in a precedent, even their successor will actually know that I should actually I should be tolerant. However, you imagine their successor coming at this point in time when there have never been any deliberations with the other opposite groups. They would know the only way you can sustain these people is to keep them away from you. You don't need to talk with them. Actually, they are not important. And that will just maybe a very bad time in our history where probably we have the things go back to the 60s, 70s, which we do not want as a country. Okay, so that platform has to be created, and for me, I think that's one of the only hopes we are left with, because with the elections, we don't want to have that talk today. Okay, so we have people who are ready. We have people who have been faces of the population. Okay, the Besigye's have been the faces of the population. The Maos are there. The Bob Wines are there. We have people from other institutions. Okay, we have people from cultural institutions. We have people from the religious institutions. All these people are saying may have been compromised in one way or the other. Their energy or their power has been cut in one way or the other. For example, the religious institutions don't have the power they had before, but it's okay. These are things, but they still have and here they can still be listened to, right?
Clout, yeah, they still have clout.
Yes. So if we can get to that point, of course, someone may cite the interparty, is it the that interparty organization that brings them the iPod,
iPod, yeah.
Someone may cite iPod, but this iPod's agenda is stupid and different.
Yeah.
Okay. So we cannot rely on iPod's agenda today because something we want to discuss now is personal. Before we discuss the very big institution which iPod is in, like bring political parties together, focused on secretary generals of political organizations, that's all useless. Activities of political organizations, that's all useless. They have achieved nothing. You need to discuss with Museveni as him, as an individual. You first discuss his needs or his wants. Because whether you deny it or not.
What do we tell to the populations? Because people like Mbabas have discussed with Museveni the national agenda, and he has betrayed them. He has refused to hand over the baton.
I don't think they discussed with Museveni for the people. They discussed with Museveni for themselves. You know that, like, at the time when they discussed with him and the agreements or the things, the goals they were towards, those were for him, Mbabas. Now you need to understand. For the representatives of the people, you need to understand what this person is up. Of course, they are lies. They are going to be lies, fine. But at the end of the day, there will be some truth by mistake. Okay? Yes. Whether you want it or not, there will be some truth by mistake. Okay? Now, yes, we can have all these things because, for example, Mbabazi's talks with him, we do not know. It has not come to public, okay? We've not come to understand the actual of how does Zimbabwe come to this? You're working with me already, okay?
Right.
And that's what I told you, that the consistency and the output of those conversations is important for the population. The population will not have any issue with Kyagulanyi. The population will not have any issue with Besigye. The population will not have any issue with you as an individual, with you as Mao, if the communications you're having, the talks you're having, are leading us to somewhere and we are seeing the progress. Because we should see progress. For example, the easiest progress should start with, can these political organizations carry on their work? You see, the Maos started these talks before. They have ever had these talks. The Maos and the Nsubugas before Matthias Nsubuga died.
Yes.
However, were these talks in favor of the population? No, these were their personal talks. Now, that's what I told you. Now, if the population cannot track that progress, then you're going to face that backlash.
So how do we have these conversations? Do we have these conversations in public? And what are some of
I don't think we need the
dilemmas?
Because there are things that you need to understand will not have to come out. Okay? And but you need to have platforms to share at a certain stage. You will not share after one meeting, you will not share after one conversation. There's a stage you reach at, and there are things you've deliberated on, and they are achievable. And then you need to share together. You need to share to the nation, okay? And that's okay. Like, you need the results. You need to share results. You may not have these talks because if you go to talks, then those will be debates on how the country should be run. Therefore, you're still giving power to this person to run. You're just telling him, no, you're running the country. Yes, we have no problem with that, but you're running this sector in a bad way. This is what we are suggesting, and those are debates which we do not want. We are saying, can we start about you transitioning power? And can we gazette back the constitution to the order we wanted or the order that it had? Can we respect that? What are we going to do to make sure that we can respect that? What are the strategies?
That we take back the consensus of the 1995 Constitution.
Exactly.
What does Dr. Mirembe think? Dr. Mirembe, as we continue to engage into this political question, this is a complicated question. This is a difficult question. Not just for us who are engaging with it right now, but for even for the political elites, those who seemingly have power and those who think that they do not have power, right? how do they get the courage to engage in these conversations, despite the tenuous connotations surrounding them?
Thank you very much again, Henry. I want to start by just restating the topic of the day, that the Uganda we want. I believe, I dream that in the Uganda we want, in the future that we are trying to set up, Katulamu, a member of the NRM, should find Sari, a member of NUP, in trouble, stops, helps him to solve the problem, despite the color differences of their political affiliations. So, in such a spirit is where I advocate that the leading political class advocates for that same kind of engagement. I'm not naive of the fact that the NRA, I personally don't call NRM the NRM because typically where we are, it is a resistance army. It's sad that we're being led by a resistance group, like just me having the word resistance. For me, what they do is like, their resistance is not just against anything, but they're resisting against the population. They are resisting against good service delivery. They are resisting against nothing but us, the people who they claim to have given them power. So in the Uganda we want, which we actually have
We have lost you. We missed that sentence.
Sorry, the politics of
Are you still with us, Doctor?
Sorry about that. Someone was calling in. Are they able to talk on a conversation that takes and makes Uganda the priority number one at the center stage? So moving forward, the Uganda we want, we are not going to realize it until when the National Resistance Army is out of state power.
But so how does National Resistance Army get out of power?
Yes, that's where I'm going. So how does National Resistance Army get out of power? You see, Henry, some time ago when I was a young boy, there used to be very big trees in the forests, in the gardens, and usually parents or a neighbor, it is in the neighborhood, and they want to cut that tree down. Usually, they first cut off the matabi, the big branches that could cause catastrophe when the tree has been cut down. Then next, they would begin digging around to expose the roots. And as they expose the roots, they cut off those roots. And then they begin to cut the tree slowly. With the time, after removing the roots which are anchoring it into the soil, the tree falls down. But remember, before it fell down, the tree branches, most of them were cut down and only left those ones to give it somewhere to fall down. So as it falls down, it's not causing a lot of havoc on the surrounding. But it has fallen down. This same perspective is the way I believe that this National Resistance Army can be removed from power. The engagement actually don't have to start. The Bob Wines and the BSG don't have to engage Museveni. Rather, they should be able to engage the branches, the roots that anchoring Museveni into power. Museveni is not sustaining himself in power. He has a lot of technocrats, a lot of allies in Uganda, in the NRA, in the opposition, outside Uganda, that are keeping him in power because of their personal interests.
But isn't
So,
that what Dr. Besige has done for the last 20 years? And has it been successful?
Henry,
Has that approach been successful? Because Besige
Henry,
is the most connected guy out of
Henry,
opposition. Is the most connected to NRM
Henry,
in terms of
I
friends
am not
and technical
Henry,
know-how.
Henry. I am not talking about connections. Maybe those are his personal connections. I'm talking about alliances that are for the country, not individuals. I would say Besige has not done actually what I'm proposing. Neither Chagula has done it. None of them has done it. Reason, as they make these deliberations, they make us, the common people, believe there is no chance for talk. There is no chance for allies within the NRM. There is no chance for anything. It is a do or die thing. You get? They
So
make
which
us,
branches are we talking about? I think we need to name those branches that you think we should be
yes,
cut off.
yes. So now, let me ask you a question actually. Besige was in NRA. Besige had network in the army, in the mainstream NRM. If he has been doing what I'm proposing, why has he for 20 plus years failed to cause change? Because when you meet, it's one thing to meet and drink marwa, and it's one thing to meet and talk about a business and mean that business. So if he has the networks, like we believe anyway, what has he been discussing with his networks? Has he been able to create trust amongst them that they are one? They have a sense of security when they forego serving the evil agendas of their master? Has he had a conversation with them on the real kind of Uganda, or when they meet, this government is bad, blah, 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 because there is what we call PR. And that's what our politicians are focusing on.
Dr. Milembe, I think this is
Building their
way,
own.
Dr. Milembe, let me interject here. I think the way you're conceptualizing the NRM and likening it to a big tree, that's
It's not the big tree is not NRM. The big tree is Museveni, the individual.
No, but that's
it is
the
what
person.
they want to dispose of.
If the big tree is Museveni, then that's the person they should be talking to. Like he has no branches.
No.
He is the person, unless you remove
Museveni has branches. You cannot want to remove a tree from the road and you talk to it. You cut off its roots.
I know,
you
but you are suggesting
the tree remains alone and it falls down when the tree is alone, isolated.
But the tree is not responsive. Museveni is responsive. He has people who are behind him that talks to him. He's always strategizing the same way that we are strategizing. Mr. Besige has intimated that Museveni is perhaps one of the strongest strategists in Ugandan within the Ugandan political cycle or political on Uganda's political landscape. This is a guy who strategizes the same way we are strategizing. This is a guy
Henry.
Most of within the opposition, right? So when you liken him to a big tree that has branches that we have to cut off and the roots that we have to cut off, we are forgetting that he's not static. He's not just standing there, but he's also strategizing to stay in power for as long as.
First of all, you are giving the opposition a very big hype, and as well Museveni. Sometimes when we fail to do things, probably we say our opponents are smarter, are stronger, but when actually it is weakness. For example, if I am having what should I call it? If I have a task to solve,
Museveni may not be smarter than most opposition leaders,
yes,
but he's definitely a
Henry,
smart guy. That's why he has managed to govern us for 35 years.
Henry, you cannot tell me that one person is smarter than all people in this country, smarter than all people who have attempted to get power into the hands of the people.
He
Let
can
me
be
tell
smarter
you,
than them.
I am
You see,
fortunate
Dr. Joe, where you're missing it, he can be
to be
smarter
the
than
part
them if these people are not
to
coming together.
one of
Okay, so because he will be smarter than each of them in that
no,
context.
look, network is becoming, I think, troublesome. But I want to put this that no, look, I have had an opportunity to work with some of these opposition figures. And because I've worked with them, I know what they be doing in their meetings, in their strategies. They are the same, and they are not actually strategizing. Let me give you an example. Recently, I was attending, I have been in the ranks of the leadership of medical students throughout. And of recent, they invited me for their general assembly. And I found their NRM actively mobilizing. You get? I didn't find there any opposition elements mobilizing. This what do we call it? This activity or event was a public event that was posted on Twitter everywhere. And actually, it is true that the organizers reached out to some of these opposition forces. They saw it irrelevant for them to engage in such an activity. This is a platform which had over 300 plus medical students. Okay? This is where they would probably also get a chance to speak to them. But where were they? And you're telling me they are strategies. Which strategies are they making? Henry, they are
no
not making any
strategizing.
strategies.
I think I would rather
I
have
have
you stick to the
personally,
point of I
I
would rather
have
have you stick to the
personally,
point of consensus building, the conversations. I'd like the fact that you are suggesting that the
yes,
opposition can as well
we
engage.
should strategize to build consensus. But we are accusing our comrades leading the opposition of strategizing. We are accusing them forcefully. And I can tell you, if there is the opposition leaders in quotes, the Chagulanyi, the Besije, the Mau, the Mugisha Muntu, the Power, and others, wake up on a day and they really mean well for this country, and they pour down their egocentrism. Because what is one keeping the opposition divided is the egocentricity that Chagulanyi doesn't want to be led by Besije, Besije doesn't want to be led by Chagulanyi. I'm just using those two as an example. You get? They feel each of them should be the one leading the other. If they get on a round table and they get to know that the villagers down there are sleeping with their goats, and that is predisposing them to disease and reducing their life expectancy and other things, then they will actually have a conversation, and what we're talking about will come in that meeting. But because these leaders feel they are the ones owning it, it took some degree of sacrifice for Raila Odinga, like my comrade has been referring to him, to accept to talk to the ruling Kenyatta. I can tell you that was not the popular move. That was not the popular move. But the politicians we have here at home prefer the popular moves, even when most of the time the popular moves are not the right moves. We have got to get politicians in the offices or in these spaces who are able to advance the right moves even when they are not popular. Where we are, as long we just look at what is popular. Church inatukolera. Church inatuyisao ngafa aba opposition. What will people buy? You get? So if you are given a task to be a leader, Henry, you make decisions for people. But what we see, people are just making decision utterances, activities that make them relevant in the media space. They are not doing things that are going to cut down the NRA occupation from office. So that's why I'm saying the time is now. for actors to come on a table after putting off their veils of egocentrism, veils of who wields more power in the opposition and the other, veils of who has fought for a very long period vis-a-vis who has just entered, and they sit on a round table. Of course, we are in a very alert to the environment we operate
How
in.
do we get rid of Mr. Museveni without negotiating with him?
Henry, I can tell you we need all approaches. We are not going to have the struggle. The revolution is not written. The revolution is not written.
The gist for this conversation is to figure out the Uganda we want, but also to specifically specify steps for getting where we want to be. How do we get to that position when we say, even though we accept, because Museveni has rigged elections more than 4 times. Every time he rigs, he comes back. And he has the backing of the military machine. Every time he rigs, he comes back. We complain, we go to the newspapers, we complain, we go to international conferences, we complain about the rigging, and the international actors continue to work with him. So how do we get rid of this guy that we see as the big tree without negotiating with him to get out of power or to facilitate a transition in the best interest of Ugandans?
I think where the conversation was going is actually where we wanted to go. One of the ways we are suggesting is that we need to get into talks. We need to derail conversations, okay, that want to take the country to where the larger population will be interested in. I think why you're asking that question again is because Joel thinks that probably you may not necessarily need to talk to Museveni to make sure that he moves out, okay? But for me, the most important thing is if you can build consensus within these parties, that's important. So what he's suggesting of talking to parties that are people or individuals that are party to him to help in that transition or in that process is not bad, okay? But if you want to take that route of conversation, dialogue, then he's a player that you do not want to dismiss, okay? It's important. He's a player that you don't want to dismiss. I'm not saying that the dialogue you have staged will not be successful. However, what I can at least be concrete about is that there will be an impact, a consequence, if he missed from the dialogue. There will be, yes, because whether you want it or not, he is important in this conversation. So what actually Joel is suggesting is very important, and it can actually be one of the ways to make sure that he actually gets to an honest conversation with you. Probably if you do not start with him and start with key strongholds of his, then that could actually push him into an honest conversation with you, okay? Because if you're speaking some of the same language with people who are keeping him in power, okay, then he gets to understand that the time is now, okay? So yes, what he's saying is important, but we also need to be mindful, because one of the issues we wanted to relay on this platform is that who are the key players in this?
Yeah,
yes,
that was my next question. Who are these key players?
We do not want to miss him, because that could lead us to certain consequence. He has led that country for more than 30 years. You do not want to miss such a person if you really want to look at a country that's going to stay for more years to come. The 30 is just actually not even according to how many years Uganda may be, okay, may stay here. So you don't want to get rid of that person in just the consequence of like, okay, we've managed to push you out, therefore we can go ahead with what we have deliberated on. So he's a key player and he has to be part. But probably the question is, how do we cause an honest conversation from him?
Yes, Henry. I agree with what Charles is actually suggesting. And actually, what I mean and what I intend to propose is the target is the leader of the NRA. But how do you shoot to target the exact bird you want from the tree? Sometimes you have got throw distractor stones that the bird probably flies in a particular direction where you want. And in that direction for you, you have laid well your killer trap. I'm trying to get into a situation of pushing my target into a direction where he's vulnerable. So what I'm trying to propose is that to make him vulnerable. His vulnerability is what not is spoken out, that you see the regime is at its most vulnerable state. No way. The vulnerability should be technically driven into his circles without probably his knowledge. At some point he will have knowledge, but have multiple channels of this. At some point he will also sit in wherever he is and he will be scared of advancing more of these atrocities, of advancing more of this clinging to power. You get? At some point, you must scare him, but these things of coming to TV and scare him, those don't work. What works is when you drive him. But currently, he's driving us. He's the one who sets the agenda. You get? He sets the agenda for talk shows. He sets the agendas for everything. So you want to remove him from power. How?
And that's why we are having this discussion, because this discussion hasn't been engaged in candidly within the Ugandan media ecosystem. Because for the obvious reasons, no one wants to engage in this discussion. But this is an important discussion that we must engage in if we are serious about building a Uganda that we want. We cannot dodge the question of transition. It's very important. The people in NRM right now are having this discussion, except they're having it amongst themselves, and that's very dangerous to leave it to the same entity that we think or that we know that is oppressing the bigger population. We cannot leave this important conversation to just NRM. This conversation cannot be between Mohozi and Rawogo. We have to engage in this conversation.
They're having a different discussion from this one. There is a different one.
Well, theirs is a completely different one, but it intimates to some sort of transition, right?
You see, their conversation is that who of us first leads, then the other comes. Who of us should take charge of the express of this country? Who is going to benefit from the roads? Who is going to benefit from the cattle? You see, our cattle is not yet the biggest export we have in this country, and so on. So many funny conversations. But Henry, since time is almost up for the show, I want to re-echo that the opposition of this country, if it exists anyway, its leaders should put off their crowns over have been here for long. The crowns over have the biggest social media following. The crowns of all manner, and come on a round table to first have this conversation amongst themselves. Because how can they propose to the other internal actors of the NRA what themselves don't have? You know, you can't give what you don't have. That's the biggest challenge. You cannot offer what you don't have. So if the opposition itself is failing to lead itself, how can it be trusted by the other people I'm just trying to advance that they have conversations with? And two, if they have to have these conversations, let them be able to account to us, the common people, not to have conversations we know about them when they leak. You get? Then we shall build more distrust amongst the masses. The opposition should have an agenda for power transition. The opposition is not there. You see, of recent, we have been saying with the Honorable Matthias Mpoka telling us accountability and service. Good topic, good motto. It is only good in normal circumstances. In our circumstances, it is not normal. You see, I want to put this again. Henry, you have, at least for you, you know about some of the things. When we wanted to take over some organization of recently, we reached out to these opposition actors, an organization which has a lot of say, that is listened to by the common people. And I can tell you, you know what they did. They didn't, not anything. Because for them, they are focusing on how to retain their constituencies. They are focusing on how to PR stunts in the parliament and everywhere. You get? So, Henry, being privy to that information, how do you tell me that they have a strategy? Why are you accusing them falsely of things? You see? Then the red card. Then what? So, like you see, Charles has commented about the red card. These people, bali kubintu birala nnyo. We are accusing them. So I want to end by saying the following. If our generation feels there is need for a better leadership, we have got to raise up to the occasion. We have got to raise up and raise the resources, build networks that are going to get us into these spaces, and we implement the right things. Otherwise, the leaders of the current people are not in charge, and they're not going to be in charge anytime soon. So we have got to be in charge. The Charles, whoever you are in Michigan, my friend, it's time to take charge. It is time to take charge and tell us the networks you have in Uganda. And, we have got to have now conversations, probably of media, on how actually to take charge, rather than the lamenting, because me, I'm really angered by the lamentations we have on daily. And probably, as myself, I'm not happy with myself because I see we are talking a lot, we are doing great.
Today we could have been talking about that deal that was then, the coffee deal that was engineered by Mr. Ngovi. But we are strategically having this conversation because we think it is important.
Yes.
What kind of Uganda do we want? What is the ideal Uganda? What kind of Uganda do we want? How do we get there? Who are these key players? Now, Mr. Museveni is saying that it's probably going to be very hard to have a conversation with Museveni because of the nature of his.
That's why I would choose to have a conversation with his roots, his branches, and such that I make him very vulnerable, and that will lower his egocentrism, because he's detached from reality. That's one. He wants power. He knows he has the branches up to the last village which can maintain him in power. But of course, of recent, he's also aware that, for example, let me give you an example. Museveni has been moving around easily. This year, when Museveni is moving from where they can close the roads in Kampala for 3 hours and you have cars not moving for 2 hours, Museveni is passing. So that alone, for me, speaks to the fact that of recent, is also aware that the masses are not with him. The masses are never anymore happy with him. But he can stay in that state for even for next 40 years if he doesn't die, if we don't take charge. You get that scare?
Mr. Katram, what do you think? Dr. Joe, let me give Mr. Katram some opportunity to respond. to some of the suggestions you have made, but also to give us his thoughts about how we should be approaching this dilemma of transition, because it is important. And even though most people are more focused on the economics and the social culture, which we must deliberate, because this is just the start of the conversation. We are going to come back next Sunday discussing this and some of the other economic and social cultural aspects on how they tie into this question. So next Sunday we shall be coming back with similar questions. But Mr. Gatram, what are your thoughts?
Well, the most important thing here is that, or out of this conversation, is that we agree the what that has to be done, which is consensus building and getting into conversations and dialogue. But now we can make, or how we can transition to the Uganda we want. That's very important. And again, we agree with the what, the how. Okay. The people we are talking about to come into this play or to take up these roles are important. However, if time comes and they cannot, okay, then there will be people who will have to take up that role. Yeah. So right now, they may not be. You may not have an equation where they miss out. Okay. But we should also know that these are individuals that need guidance. They are not in themselves prophets, right? They need guidance. They need advice on how to move forward. Okay, how Kyagulanyi got to his decision to come to stand for presidency, and how and him getting into presidency and the nominations and everything may have been a half-baked idea, but he got there, right? Now, how you make Kyagulanyi a statesman is another story, which is not in the conversation today of the people around him. Okay. Now, that's what actually Joel is suggesting, that if they cannot do, then there are other people need to come up and do. Okay. But you are not going to have the whole population come into this, because what we are agreeing on is that the right direction to take is that of consensus, the civil one. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you want to take that, then you need a representation that can work towards that with an agenda set. Okay. Exactly what I told you, that if there is a platform to be created, then you need to know what is the input of the other group into that agenda and what's the input of the other group into that agenda. And then you can move this forward. So there are very many reasons to blame the current people in the opposition, or the current people you call opposition leaders. But there is also an intention to understand that before Kyagulanyi became who he is now, he had his individual will that you who supports him, or you who works with him, or you who sidelines with him, did not know about. The same to Museveni, the same to another person, the same to Mugisha Muntu and everyone. Okay.
Right.
However, when it comes to the play, you start selling to them what can better their will. Okay? Because Kyagulanyi would have decided to go back to parliament.
Right.
Okay? Yes. And so the exact thing I was telling you, that these and you see all these challenges that Joel is coming up with, which are true. For example, how they are not coming together because of maybe their egos and everything in the opposition and all that. You see, all those is because there are no people that are there to guide them. There is no reason until now why you have such an opposition that we have in the country. Because they don't have the power. They also know it. If they knew, if they don't know, then they are a mess. They don't know what they want for the country. If they don't know that they don't have the power, because if they thought they had the power, then they would be the ones in charge today. But they know why they're not the ones in charge. Okay? So if they're saying they don't know where the power is, then we shouldn't deal with such people, because where are they going to get it from? You cannot look for what you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They may be targeting a wrong person or a wrong group. Okay,
Yeah.
so they know they don't have the power. So once they, so these are few angry people that are pushing away the food from each other because they don't want to agree on how to approach the food or on how to approach the place where the food is. Now, and this is where other groups of people, the civil society, this is where the media, before Jacob Olanya died, he had promised to have such a conversation that we're having now. Okay? Yeah. Probably it would have changed the landscape in one way or the other. Probably it would have changed the way the media talks in one way or the other. Okay? Now, this is where the institutions that we were talking about, the cultural institutions, the religious institutions, this is where we have to come in. And that's what Joel is suggesting. And those are the other people Joel is talking about. Okay? Today, Kyagulanyi may not see this as the right agenda. Today, basically may not see this as the right agenda. But Kyagulanyi Obesigye, Omugisha Muntu can be convinced by the institutions that maybe they align with. Okay? So, before we even look at how, before blaming these individuals themselves or parties or political organizations, we need to understand that we ourselves as well have a contribution we need to make. The institutions like education, the institutions like cultural institutions, religious institutions need to come. If these political players have failed to partake this role, then we need to come in to show them that this is the direction we need to take as a country. Because anyway, even if they did not take it, they're not into power again, and we're not seeing the Uganda we want. And basically, actually, what we're saying is, it's not that if the opposition comes into power, we are getting the Uganda we need. No. That's why we're not talking about exchange of power from the current ruling party to the opposition, but we're speaking about a transition. And we are saying the discussion should be around which kind of transition should happen. Okay? And can we respect that transition? Can we support it? Can we make sure that if it happened, it is of the will of the poor and it will be supported? And then we shall have a track progress of such transitions happening in the country. And that's how the country grows. What is happening in Ghana today did not happen in 2000, it was not there in 2001 when Gary Rawlings left. But when they respected the process of the state and they managed to go ahead, over 20 years, they have built something that was not there in 2001. In Uganda, probably right now, what you might be having is a destruction of what was there in 2001, which is absurd. So, finally, the consensus is important. The dialogue is important. The other institutions are important to come in and fulfill their role. They shouldn't be quiet. They shouldn't jump on every story. Okay, it is better. Yes, we know. Today you don't talk about beating people or killing people or what. We know. Okay, now we are tired. That I think it doesn't take us anywhere. The civil society. The more you talk about how floods this side, how no housing this side as a civil society. Yes, we have had that conversation for the last over 20 years. So what's next? We need to move forward.
Yes, we need, like James is saying, we need to move away from lamentation, rhetoric, speech, to moves, strategies, and processes with events that take us away from the real root cause. Otherwise, rhetoric has got people political positions and it will continue to do so. But of course, the recent benchmarks we can take from Kayunga, that even when you use rhetoric to earn the trust of the voters, the current NRA regime can actually take away that win. So I think it's a high time that our politicians, our political activists, the civil society, the religious cultural institutions, leaders in all sectors, all wings that make up this country, realize we have an urgent, unattended to issue. And that's how power moves from one group to another. Because it is not the last time that Uganda will get bad leaders.
Exactly.
50 years from now,
Yeah.
20, 30 years, assuming NRM tomorrow left, we can again get bad leaders. But when right systems are in place, strong systems, institutions are in place, they will not allow that leader to live for long in power.
That's the Uganda we want.
That's the Uganda we want. You see, the people in the US, many of them complain about Trump. So the system allowed him out of power in one Chisanja. Probably he will come back a reformed person. But even when he come back, if he misbehaves, he will be taken away by the system that actually is overseeing. So that's the Uganda we want. That's why we are making the noise we make. That's the kind of Uganda we want. Because we know we cannot control the people's personal characters. You know, people will be funny in one way or the other. But when that person turns funny, turns evil, turns corrupt, turns irresponsible, is the system in place to dispose him off without violence, without bloodshed, without creating a lot of harm to the existing state system? Because currently, I must speak and say without fear of contradiction, we don't have the state. If we have a state, it is the NRA and nothing else. So how would we get back to the Uganda we want? We know very well that the boundaries were created by the colonialists. We seemingly we are led, and seemingly the way we're living, it's like we are still colonized, and a lot of other issues. But now, bearing in mind all the other circumstances that are historical, that are structural, how do we move on from that space, get to a space where we can always have transfer of power, and that transfer is a honest reflection of the people's will. People's will. Then from there, we can now talk about how to make healthcare better. We can talk about how to further strengthen the education system. We can talk about a better road network, rail network, and other things. But without this, even if we talk about all these other things, because policies are in existence, I think Uganda has, most of its policies are good, but they are not under implementation because we have a leadership problem.
Crisis. Yeah, so are those your last words? I want to ask Mr. Kaloma to give us his last words as well. And then I'm going to ask you guys to prepare for another similar conversation in the coming days.
Okay, my last words, of course, cannot miss to recognize the fact that today is Easter Day and people all over the world are celebrating, they are having fun. I want to tell people not to drink and drive. 2 days ago, some drunkard knocked me when I'm actually in my lane. He just moved from his lane and knocked me. So people should not drink and drive. Of course, did knock me, the physical person knocked my car. But of course, I was in the car. So people should not drink and drive. People should do, if the worst goes to the worst, let our leaders mimic, emulate the leader who Christ Jesus was. Since we have had this conversation at such a time when we are celebrating his brave action of accepting to die for the people. Of course, the Bible clearly states that, and for us believers, we believe he resurrected and took away a lot that was made a sacrifice for us. But now, there are things he did when he's alive as a leader. And we realize he was always almost below his followers. He was humble to the fact that his followers mattered more than anything. So our leaders should learn, know what we, the common people, need. Then put that before what they want, because I know them also, they have their personal interests. Their personal interests should not take center stage on causes that are for the bigger country future, the bigger well-being of the other people. Otherwise, I send my greetings to the people from Maokota. That's where I come from. Happy Easter to everyone. Happy Easter to the followers and those ones who spread the messages that we discuss here on the state of the nation. Of course, thank you, Henry Sari, for lobbying for this space and always lobbying for facilities to sustain the space, the data, and every other thing. We are grateful as individuals. Thank you for hosting me in that regard.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Bileb, and happy Easter. Mr. Katram, soon to be doctor.
Finally, I want to say that as a nation, we need to come to terms and understand that even when you disagree with someone today, because you do not have the power and they have the power, you will need to live with that person tomorrow in case you have the power. So there is no reason whatsoever to be a hateful person to the other people. And then that means, or should mean, that we need to look for new strategies on how to work together for the country. Of course, there are many people, and this has been ingrained in many young people within the country and away, that because we are in the state we are in now, it is all because of the people who are in power. Yes, it can be, but tomorrow it can also be because of the people you're working with today or you want to be in power today. Okay? So some of these are issues that are beyond some people's understanding and contemplations, and therefore it's better to guide them in the right way. And that right way is you do not lose hope of individuals seeking to redress challenges in a new way simply because you think the noise and everything will take away, what you think is wrong. So these leaders as well need the conscious support.
Right.
You should move away from the politics of emotions, okay? And we talk the actual politics for the nation that takes the nation forward. Otherwise, most of the politics that we have today is politics of emotions. And we have no issues that are driven forward, even when we have an opposition in a country, in a parliament, for example, that is standing. So all those who do not agree with those in power need to understand that probably it is the time to change the course from where you think you're going to take this country forward from. You will not stand in these elections and partake that country. That has been confirmed. So whether you want it or not, you can disagree with me, you can shout at me, but that's it. Even the next 5 years, you remain in the same state, okay, of affairs. You will not change. And therefore, it is better to try other ways than remaining consistently on a strategy that has failed to work. So whoever is up there, don't lose the hope because people are redressing challenges in a new way. It's rather to understand and give them the ample time to see what the progress is and what the outcome is. And that's how we shall be able to move together as a country. I always tell people, yes, you can blame Museveni today because he's the president. You can blame other leaders of NRM because they are in power today. But many of these people who are also doing wrong things in this country are your parents, are your siblings. There are many people today who are doing these things, yet they are your parents, they are your siblings. Yes, they are serving Museveni, but they agreed to serve him. But since they are your parents, you should have been expecting something. So don't think that this country is going to change in a snapshot. We need progress that's going to be built on over time. So even the people you see today shouting on the other side actually have the same attributes or behaviors like those who are today treating the country the way they are treating it. So it's not just about a conversation of who has the power today. It's a very long conversation that we've been trying to answer towards, and we need it. We need to speak to each other. We need to speak to this country to see that we can move it forward. Otherwise, we are going to remain in the same state of affairs, regardless of who is the president, because the people are going to remain the same. We are the same Ugandans. We are not changing from that. Therefore, if we remain with the same attributes and fail to change where we're supposed to change, even us as individuals, then we are not taking the country anywhere. I want to thank everyone, Henry, Joel, for putting up a good debate, and all those that have been following up and those that will follow up later offline. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Katrams. Thank you so much, Dr. Joel Mirembe. Very, very interesting submissions. We are trying to grapple with the question, which is seemingly a simple question. The question regarding the Uganda we want. What does it look like, and how do we achieve it? The dialogue today, as I mentioned in my preamble, for those of you who do actually take time to read my preamble, I said that for far too long, almost 4 decades ago, Uganda has been acting, or Ugandans, to be specific, Ugandans have been acting reactionary to Mr. Museveni's rhetoric of the so-called fundamental change he promised in 1986. Often Mr. Museveni has attributed our unstrategic response of his leadership as a lack of vision for the country. And indeed, Mr. Museveni has taken advantage of our reactionary nature by consolidating his dictatorial phenomenon of governing Uganda. I gave an example and said that, for instance, Uganda, instead of Mr. Museveni professionalizing the army, he has seemingly personalized it. Instead of managing sectarianism in general, he has promoted tribal and ideological sectarianism. Indeed, Mr. Museveni has even seemingly succeeded in dismantling cultural institutions, even though the project Uganda was built on cultural pluralism. So, as we engage with this question of understanding the Uganda we desire, how it looks like and how it should be, how we get there, we must be cognizant of how Ugandans have been duped over the last 4 decades through organizing sham elections and broken systems of governance. And I say that specifically, we must lay out a clear vision for what an ideal Uganda should look like. We must discuss the past, the present, and the future of our country. What was, what is, and what it should be. We must examine the political, the economical, and the socio-cultural aspects of Uganda and determine the important pieces of the puzzle that is Uganda. We must figure out something that we have tried to do in this conversation, figuring out who the key players are, why they are the key players, and why they should be engaged in this conversation pertaining to the process of realizing the Uganda we want. This conversation is going to continue. It doesn't end today. We are going to have a similar conversation next weekend because we want to know what's going on and how do we get where we want to be. So hopefully you'll have the courage to join us. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to wish you a happy rest of the Easter weekend. For those of you who celebrate Easter on Monday, happy Easter Monday. For us here in Canada, most of us, unless you work for government, we shall be going back to work tomorrow, and we are looking forward to that. But I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you for your contributions. Again, happy Easter, and have a great rest of your weekend. Think about, contemplate about the Uganda we want. This is the state of the nation. Irifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salu.